Hello, and welcome to Sleep Haven. Tonight, we're traveling far back in time, long before cities, roads, or farms, into a world shaped only by the land, the seasons, and the steady rhythm of nature. So, get comfortable, let your body settle, and allow your breathing to slow. And if you prefer an off-screen experience without distractions, you can listen on Spotify. The link is in the description below. Now, let your thoughts drift as we begin this journey. Long before permanent homes or boundaries, human life followed the patterns of the land. Small groups moved across forests, grasslands, rivers, and hills. They stayed where resources were plentiful and moved on when they were not. Life unfolded according to the sun, the wind, and the availability of food. Days began with the first light and ended when darkness arrived. Every moment was shaped by watching and learning from the world around them. People paid attention to everything. The shape of leaves, the color of the sky, the movement of animals, and the flow of water. Knowledge was held in memory and shared through example. Children learned by watching, elders taught by showing, and understanding grew slowly over time. There was no rush and no strict schedules. Life simply moved with the patterns of the world. Food was collected carefully. Fruits, nuts, and roots were taken as they became ready. People remembered where certain plants grew and when they were best to harvest. Tracking animals was done patiently, observing footprints, noting broken branches, and following subtle signs. Every observation mattered and helped people understand their surroundings. Possessions were few. Tools were simple, made from stone, wood, and bone. Only what could be carried was kept. Even with so little, life was full. People noticed the cycles of day and night, the changing seasons, and the shifts in weather. Time was felt rather than measured. Shadows grew and shrank. The air warmed and cooled, and the land moved through its natural cycles. Over many seasons, patterns became clear. Certain plants returned to the same places. Seeds dropped to the ground would grow new plants. Slowly, people realized that these processes could be observed, remembered, and even encouraged. The idea emerged that food did not have to be found entirely by chance. It could be guided and cared for. As the sun moved across the sky, the day continued. People moved with purpose, sometimes gathering, sometimes preparing, sometimes resting. Life was shaped by action and attention rather than clocks or schedules. In the evening, groups returned together, shared food, and prepared for the night. Movements slowed, voices softened, and the sky darkened as stars appeared. Life continued in repeating cycles, reinforcing understanding of the land and its rhythms. Take a slow breath in and let it out. Let your mind follow this early world. People had been observing plants for many generations. They noticed patterns in how seeds fell, how roots grew, and how certain plants returned in the same places each year. The earliest efforts were small. Perhaps a few seeds were scattered near a familiar spot. Perhaps a root was planted intentionally in loosened soil. These were not large fields or rows, only small areas where the land was fertile and water was available. People began to pay closer attention to which seeds grew best and where they thrived. Over time, they learned which plants provided the most food, which grew fastest, and which were easiest to store. This was the beginning of cultivation. People did not yet fully understand the science of growth. They did not know about nutrients, soil chemistry, or genetics, but they understood observation and patience. They watched, experimented, and remembered. They followed the cycles of rain and sun, the changing seasons, and the movement of animals that could affect their crops. Each day offered lessons. Each season reinforced what they had learned. Food became more predictable. A small plot of planted seeds could provide a steady supply for a short time. This predictability allowed people to spend more time in one place. They did not have to move as frequently, and they could plan for the days ahead. Over many years, the simple act of planting a seed, waiting, and harvesting became part of life. It became a rhythm tied to nature and to the passage of time. Along with planting came other discoveries. People noticed that some plants grew better when certain seeds were left to fall naturally. Others grew faster if the soil was cleared of rocks or loosened. They began to prepare the land, clearing areas, digging small holes, and covering seeds with soil. They returned at the right times to harvest what had grown. They experimented with different methods, noting what worked and what did not. Knowledge accumulated slowly, passed from one person to another, from one season to the next. Even the gathering of wild plants changed. People began to combine what they found with what they had planted. A root that had always been dug in one place could now be planted in a new area. Berries that grew in the forest could be encouraged to grow near where people stayed. This blending of observation, memory, and experimentation formed the earliest understanding of agriculture. Animals also became part of this new way of life. People noticed which animals ate certain plants, which helped scatter seeds, and which could be managed around the growing areas. Perhaps a few goats or sheep were kept nearby. Perhaps birds were watched for where they dropped seeds. Life began to interweave with the land in new ways, creating patterns that would grow more complex over generations. Through all of this, life remained deliberate. There was no rush to create large fields or elaborate systems. Every experiment, every observation, every small planting was a step forward. Each seed planted was an investment in the future, a way to guide nature rather than depend entirely on chance. Knowledge grew slowly, shaped by experience and repeated attention to detail. Evening came as it always had, and people gathered again. The day's efforts were reviewed, meals were shared, and lessons were remembered. The land had provided, as it always did, and people began to notice that their efforts made a difference. Planting and care could influence what the land offered, creating small but meaningful changes. Imagine the first seeds planted by human hands. Imagine watching them grow through the days and seasons. Each small sprout carried a promise, a lesson, and the first steps toward a life shaped by observation, care, and patience. These seeds were more than food. They were the beginning of a new understanding, the start of agriculture, and the foundation for everything that would come later. As people noticed that planted seeds could return food, life began to change. Small areas of land prepared for planting became familiar places to return to season after season. Over time, some groups chose to stay near these areas rather than moving constantly in search of food. This marked the beginning of the first permanent settlements. These early settlements were practical. People built shelters from wood, leaves, and other materials provided by the land. The structures were functional rather than decorative, offering protection from wind, rain, and sun. Settlements were arranged near water sources, fertile land for planting, and areas where wild plants and animals could still be gathered. Life in these settlements followed the patterns of the natural world, shaped by sunlight, rivers, and the passing seasons. People's daily routines were guided by these patterns, and each day provided opportunities to learn from the land. With more time in one place, people could focus on caring for their plants and observing the land in greater detail. They learned which areas produced the best crops, which soil needed attention, and how to use water effectively. Small gardens and plots of cultivated plants became central to daily life. People noticed how plants responded to changes in weather, how soil retained moisture, and which plants grew well together. Each season brought lessons that shaped the way they worked with the land. Settlements encouraged cooperation. People worked together to plant and harvest, build and repair shelters, and manage shared resources. Skills were passed from one generation to the next through practice and example. Children and young people took part in planting, gathering, and tending the land. Observation became a shared effort as people noticed patterns and shared discoveries. Knowledge grew in depth and detail, not through formal teaching, but through doing, watching, and remembering. Animals also became part of life around settlements. Some animals were kept nearby for food, clothing, or other uses. People noticed how animals interacted with plants and the land. Observing their behavior helped manage crops, protect gardens, and enrich soil. Birds scattering seeds or small animals burrowing near plants revealed natural patterns that could be used effectively. Life began to include a balance between cultivated plants and the surrounding ecosystem, creating patterns that developed over generations. Settlements encouraged the first forms of planning and organization. People began to arrange their shelters thoughtfully, placing storage areas near gardens, tools near workspaces, and paths connecting different parts of the community. They noted which areas were prone to flooding or retained water best. They learned to rotate plots, avoid overworking the soil, and collect seeds for future planting. Each choice was guided by observation, experience, and understanding of the environment. Life in these first settlements was deliberate. There was no rush to create large fields or complex systems. Every experiment, observation, and small planting was a step forward. Each seed planted was an investment in the future, a way to guide nature rather than depend entirely on chance. Knowledge developed gradually through experience, attention, and repeated effort. Evening arrived as it always had. People gathered near shelters, shared meals, and reflected on the day. Some worked with tools to repair shelters, others checked on growing plants, and some prepared food from the harvest. The land had provided, and people began to notice the effects of their work. Planting and care influenced the resources they relied on, producing meaningful results over time. Settlements allowed people to store food for times when fresh crops were not available. Grain, roots, and dried fruits were collected and preserved. This storage created stability and allowed people to plan for the future and experiment with planting methods. Over many seasons, small settlements became more organized, with shared practices and knowledge that connected generations. Take a slow breath in and let it out. Picture the first small settlements forming among the fields and gardens. Imagine people tending crops, building and maintaining shelters, observing the land, and caring for animals. Life was shaped by human effort, observation, and cooperation. These settlements were more than places to live. They were the beginnings of communities and the foundation for civilizations that would grow in the years to come. Each planted seed, each careful observation, and each shared effort created patterns that would last beyond one generation. As settlements became more established, people began to explore new ways to make life easier and more productive. Observing nature had always guided them, and these observations led to simple innovations. Tools became more refined and versatile. Stones were shaped to cut, dig, or scrape, while wooden sticks were sharpened for planting seeds or harvesting roots. Containers were made from clay, woven fibers, and hollowed wood to carry water, store seeds, and preserve food. Each improvement allowed people to manage the land more effectively and gave them time to observe, experiment, and plan. Agriculture became increasingly organized. People noticed which plants grew best together, which areas received the most sunlight, and how water moved across the land. They began to rotate plots, planting some areas one season and others the next. This rotation helped soil recover and increased the yield of crops over time. People learned to select seeds from the strongest plants, gradually shaping the future of their crops. Some experimented by combining different plants in the same plot, observing which combinations produced the best results. Small experiments like these influenced larger planting practices across the community. As settlements improved, more people could live in one place because food was more predictable and abundant. Homes were arranged thoughtfully, with spaces for storage, work, and gatherings. Paths connected different parts of the community, and certain areas were set aside for planting, gathering, and keeping animals. Each settlement became a network of shared work and knowledge, a place where practical understanding could grow alongside the community. Daily life balanced routine and experimentation. People checked on crops, tended animals, repaired shelters, and gathered wild plants. Some tested new planting methods, while others observed animal behavior, noting which species helped scatter seeds, which disturbed the soil, and which required attention. Children and young people learned by participating, noticing patterns, and remembering what worked best. Each season brought insights, and each harvest offered feedback to guide the next planting cycle. Knowledge grew steadily through repeated observation and experience. Animals played an important role in these communities. Some were kept nearby for milk, meat, or hides, while others roamed near fields, spreading seeds or enriching the soil. Life depended on balancing cultivated plants, managed animals, and the surrounding natural world, creating systems that would develop over generations. Settlements allowed people to plan ahead. Surplus food could be stored for times when harvests were smaller or when weather was less favorable. Labor was divided. Some focused on planting, others tended animals, and others built or repaired shelters. Cooperation became essential, and communities grew stronger as knowledge was shared and applied. People began to see clear connections between the way work was organized, the patterns of the land, and the outcomes of their effort. Settlements also encouraged careful observation of the environment. People learned to note signs of changing weather, cycles of plant growth, and animal behavior. These observations help determine when to plant, when to harvest, and how to manage water and soil. Each season provided new insights that gradually formed the foundation for more advanced agricultural practices. Evening provided an opportunity to reflect on the day. People gathered near shelters, shared meals, and considered what they had learned. They observed which planting methods worked well, which areas of soil needed care, and how animals affected the crops. Each observation contributed to the community's knowledge. Over many seasons, these practices allowed settlements to grow steadily, forming patterns of life that could support larger populations and ensure greater resilience. Picture these early settlements expanding, tools shaping the land, and crops growing in organized plots. Imagine people working together, tending plants and animals, observing patterns, and sharing knowledge. Each improvement, each new tool, and each careful planting method strengthened the connection between people and the land. These steps toward organization, technology, and agriculture laid the groundwork for the development of civilizations. Each choice, observation, and effort built understanding that would influence generations to come. As agriculture became more established, the changes it brought reached far beyond individual settlements. People could produce more food than they immediately needed, and this surplus allowed communities to grow larger and more organized. With more reliable food sources, some members of the community could focus on tasks beyond farming. They began to craft tools, construct stronger shelters, create pottery, and develop skills that improved daily life. These new roles encouraged cooperation and allowed knowledge to spread and develop in ways that had not been possible when everyone relied solely on gathering or hunting. Settlements became centers of learning, observation, and practical innovation. Communities did not remain isolated. People began to connect with neighboring settlements, exchanging seeds, tools, and ideas. Knowledge about which plants thrived in certain soils, how to prepare fields, and how to manage water moved across regions. Communities learned from each other's experiences, adopting methods that had proven successful. As these connections expanded, networks of cooperation formed, allowing settlements to support larger populations. Stability grew with these networks, giving people the ability to plan for future seasons and to preserve knowledge for generations. These early networks laid the foundation for trade, communication, and the exchange of ideas that would shape entire regions. As populations increased, social roles became more defined. Some focused on cultivating and managing crops, while others tended animals, built or repaired shelters, or specialized in tools and containers. Communication and coordination were essential. Decisions were guided by observation, experience, and shared understanding. People learned to depend on one another while maintaining a connection to the land that provided for them. Communities became more organized, and cooperation influenced every aspect of daily life. Each person's contribution supported both immediate needs and the long-term well-being of the group. The long-term effects of agriculture were significant. Communities were no longer entirely dependent on the unpredictable availability of wild food. People could shape their environment with intention, improving soil, cultivating plants, and managing animals in ways that increased productivity. These practices created a feedback loop. The more people learned about the land, the better they could care for it, and the more productive it became. Knowledge accumulated across generations, forming the foundation for civilizations that would develop thousands of years later. These early agricultural communities demonstrated how observation, experimentation, and cooperation could create lasting change. Agriculture also influenced the way people experienced time and life cycles. Seasons became markers for planting, tending, and harvesting crops, and calendars were created to track the cycles of the sun and the moon. Gatherings and celebrations often aligned with seasonal changes, linking human activity to natural rhythms. Observing the land and the sky became a shared practice, creating order and continuity. People came to understand their role as part of a larger system in which human effort and natural patterns worked together to support life. Awareness of these cycles encouraged planning, patience, and a deeper understanding of how human activity and the environment were connected. Even as settlements grew, the lessons learned from early communities remained central. Observation, experimentation, cooperation, and planning guided daily life. Each improvement in tools, crops, or organization built on the knowledge of previous generations. Every new insight shaped the community and its relationship with the land, creating practices that would influence generations to come. People learned that small, consistent actions could have meaningful, lasting effects. Communities became repositories of knowledge, skill, and understanding that extended beyond individual lifetimes. Picture early settlements evolving into larger communities with organized fields, cultivated gardens, and managed animals. Imagine people sharing knowledge, working together, and observing the land while adapting to its patterns. Consider the influence of these communities. The beginnings of organized society, the spread of tools and techniques, and the growth of cooperative networks. Each improvement, every new tool, and every careful planting method strengthened the connection between people and the land. The seeds planted in those early settlements were more than plants. They were ideas, habits, and understanding. They connected people to one another and to the land, forming the foundation for communities, cultures, and civilizations. Each decision, observation, and effort contributed to a world shaped by curiosity, cooperation, and ingenuity. Picture how these choices influenced generations, how they created patterns that guided life, and how they established the foundations for innovation, learning, and collaboration. The work of these first communities became the roots from which human civilization would grow, showing that consistent effort and shared knowledge can create lasting impact. Thank you for allowing me to guide you into rest tonight. I hope this episode helps you relax and drift into a restful sleep. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to the channel to join us for future episodes. Sharing this podcast with friends or loved ones can help them find calm and rest as well. Sleep well, and may your night be peaceful and your dreams